I wanted to talk today first a little bit about some of the things I'm doing in Sacramento, and have a good understanding of those issues is very important right now, because there's going to be some decisions going to be made really quickly in Sacramento on these issues. And there's this committee that I'm chairing. It's called the Budget Subcommittee number 2, which oversees resources, environmental protection, energy, and transportation. Okay, so I chair all the money that goes into those kinds of programs. We're addressing a major issue, among others, to how to effectively expand a program called the Cap and Trade program. Now, how many people have heard about that? Some of you. Well, what it is a way of developing a pollution funding to reduce pollution. And there's a greenhouse gas emissions, and it's to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in California. This was created in 2006 with AB 32, a law that talked about reducing greenhouse gas reductions to the 1990 levels by the year 2020. So the idea is they're going to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions back to what it was in 1990. And the way they do that is they auction off emission allowances, something called an emission allowance, which generates revenue. And this auction takes place 2 or 3 times a year, and so far, in the 6 auctions that they've had so far, it's generated $663 million of revenue. Now, next year, this auction is probably going to generate double that, because they're going to start to sell pollution allowances, that's the phrase, in January 2015 on the transportation fuel sector. So any kind of pollution that comes out of the transportation fuel sector, oil, gasoline, and so forth, is going to generate some auction allowances that come into that. We're hearing revenue estimates from that. It's going to be to $2 to $4 billion annually. Okay. Now that's what I'm looking at. What is the investment of these revenues? It's an opportunity and responsibility that we have to take very seriously. And we have this system whereby if we approve these auction revenues for a particular project, we have to have a nexus. That's the word the lawyers use. How many lawyers are in here? A couple? Okay, you know what that means. The nexus means that we have to prove that it actually is directly going to the tax purpose of which the tax is called for. So we have to spend it on direct reduction of air pollution. And we want to see if we get our bang for our buck, of course. You know, are we really getting any reduction in air pollution? We're going to have different kinds of categories, and there's all kinds of categories. But I'll tell you right now, according to the Air Resources Board, 40% of the revenues or the pollution comes from transportation. About 17% from electrical power generation. So things like transportation projects that reduce the vehicle miles traveled. Things like retrofitting or upgrading buildings or modernizing things are projects that are really eligible for these kinds of funds. Now, I think this is where your industry over the next 7 years stands to benefit, because I think there's going to be a lot of construction that's going to be funded by this with that $2 to $4 billion a year. It could be up to $5 billion. We're not sure. Now, what am I going to talk about here? Well, have anybody heard of the high-speed rail project? Okay, well, the governor wants to take some of those auction revenues and fund the high-speed rail project. Okay, that's one of the things you ought to know. He wants some of that money for that project. And I've been talking to the governor about this, and I said, well, you know, having been working on transportation projects for some time, I believe in the concept of you're going to have rail projects that's got to go somewhere, and it's got to connect to something, right? So if you're going to get on a train and you want to go somewhere, it's got to have that, at least some kind of connectivity so you can get to where you're going, at least for the most part. And it has to be located next to highly congested corridors so you can get people out of their cars into transit so that you can reduce the freeway. You know, let's talk about I-80, the I-80 corridor. What would happen if they had a, say, a rail project that went from Fairfield to Oakland in like 30 minutes? What would happen if they had a connection to BART that went all the way to Vallejo? How about Los Angeles, the 405? What would happen if they had a rail corridor that went down, a project that went parallel to the 405? What kind of traffic would be reduced? Well, there's projects like that all over the state. They're actually projects that have been approved by the voters, and I think that one of the things that cap and trade pollution allowance credit funds could be used for is to advance those projects. And rather than wait 20 years for them, let's build them in like 5 to 7 years. Let's build them right now. Let's get going and build these projects. Now that $4 to $5 billion a year could be securitized. In other words, we could use it to finance some of these projects so we could advance them right away. Now, I have a project that you're probably aware of. It's very critical to my district, and I'll give you an example of a project that I've been following and been pushing for a long time, and that's the BART to San Jose project from Fremont to BART to connect into downtown and then up to the airport. It's like a $8 billion project. It's being built right now. We have that $4 billion section into North San Jose, but then there's a section that goes from North San Jose into the downtown and up to the San Jose airport. And of course, you're going to be able to go to the Levi's Stadium for the 49ers. And I think getting that project finished, according to, I'll just give you some numbers, the kinds of things we look at when we talk about these cap and trades funds. That particular project removes 33,000 daily auto trips. It reduces 16,000 tons of pollutants a year out of the sky, and 146 million vehicle miles traveled annually is reduced. So that really would help with the congestion on these freeways like 680, 880, 280, all the freeway projects that are congested every day. They're going like creeping along at 20 miles an hour through the Bay Area. And you know that in California we have, of the 10 worst congested metro areas, we have 3 of them: San Jose, Los Angeles, and San Diego. So we have the worst congestion in the country, and it's time we deal with it. We need to inject these projects, and I have another bias, and it kind of comes from what you were saying when we built the traffic authority. We just created an authority in Santa Clara County. We passed the first half-cent sales tax, and it was used by a model for 28 counties in California. Maybe some of you worked on various projects. When we did that, we kind of decided that we didn't want Caltrans to kind of work their system in terms of the way we built the projects. How many people would agree with that? You guys like that idea? Some of you. Only one hand is willing to raise his hand. But what we did is, I actually fired Caltrans at one point. But what we did is we decided that we weren't going to follow the same rules, procedures, and those kinds of things, that we wanted to create a better way of building things in California. So we had a public-private partnership. in terms of the construction of these projects. And we were open to the flexibility. We wanted the flexibility to build the projects the way we thought would be the best way. So part of the process was to eliminate a lot of the time it took to, you know, when you talk about projects, a lot of the time is taken. I think somebody said once, most of the time is taken, there's more time taken with the politics of a project than the actual construction of the project. When you talk about some of these projects, you know, it takes more to do the political stuff than it does to actually build the project. And so like narrowing that timeline and getting rid of the time on building projects is so important. So what I'd like to see this cap and trade money go to is I'd like to see it go to the California Transportation Commission and go directly to the people that build the project and not have to go through like regional agencies and have the plan and you know, take a long time, like the Bay Bridge project. You know, I'm sorry, but I mean, some of you might have been involved in that, but it took 25 years, right? And we need a system that can get these projects done quickly because the goal is, after all, to reduce pollution. We're going to have a nexus. I also, as a transportation guy, want to say that we need to have a program for, we're focusing also on road repair projects. That's an immediate need. We had a hearing on potholes in my committee earlier this year. Fix the roads now, don't wait because they get worse, right? So we had a hearing about how to deal with this multi-billion-dollar problem in California. And we strongly support diesel fuels taxes being used for road repairs rather than to be used to pay off bonds that can be used. We can find other funds to pay off. And I think we need to have a revenue plan for coming up with all kinds of new revenue, because you can't just invent money to pay for things or sell debt to pay for things, you know. You have to come up with a revenue. So I think we need to have some kind of vehicle license fee or some form of tax on fuel, or we're looking at a process for vehicle miles travel fee or something like that to pay for some of these projects. I want to say that I think that we need to reform the way we efficiently build projects in California. I'm an advocate for change. I think there has to be change. And streamlining the process and the timeline for projects, looking at the way we build projects, making it more cost-effective in terms of the timeline is something that I believe we can do. There are models in California that we did it in a certain way a lot quicker than the normal way. There are models in other states that are the same way, that we can build things quicker and better. I think we ought to continue to explore those kinds of ways to do things, and any ideas your group has to accomplish that, I'll be willing to work with you on that, because I think that's going to be the key things. Because I'll give you an example. I asked the director of the High-Speed Rail Authority, I said, well, when are you going to finish your project? He says, well, we have scheduled to finish it in 2028. Okay, and I said, well, is that a project that's based on, if you just had all the resources to build it and it was not, if it was just the construction timeline, when would you be able to finish it? He says, oh, we could probably finish it in 2023. In other words, we can finish it 5 years faster in 2023. Now get that. If we could figure out how to deal with this efficiency and timelines, we can not only build something faster, and every time we build something faster, I know it saves the taxpayers money, because that's the truth. We can build more projects with that money that we save, then we can spend money on other things that are really important, other projects that are really important to help people move better. And I think that's going to be a key thing right now in looking at the high-speed rail project. I just wanted to end with that, and thank you very much for inviting me, and wish you luck on all the work you do, and please keep me informed with what your positions are on all the many pieces of legislation I'll be voting on. So thank you very much.